right, thank you. So it's really fun to be back here. This room didn't exist when I was on campus. What's this room called? Digital Scholarship Lab. There were no digital scholarships in 1986. But in talking with these guys, they thought it would be interesting for you to hear a little bit about my entrepreneurial journey and my story. And we'll talk a little bit about Techstars and entrepreneurial. We'll mix it all up. This is for you. It's not for me. I've told this story many times before, and so I don't need to hear it. So you guys, I'm going to give you the task of keeping me moving faster, slower, asking questions, engaging. We'll have a little time for Q&A at the end, but it's for you guys. Is that cool? So hopefully you'll walk out of here and you'll have the story of an entrepreneur, you'll get some lessons, and we'll have some time for Q&A. So, but the last time I told this story, what happened was I was sitting, it was a classroom situation, a little closer. I was sort of sitting like this, and there was a classroom full of people, and I like making eye contact and engaging with people. And there was this woman sitting right here, and she would not look at me. She had her head down and was doodling the entire time, just being the rudest could possibly be, just scribbling away, not looking up, not once. And then, as soon as I was finished, and I said, does anybody have any questions? Guess whose hand was the first one up in the air? It was her. And I was not going to call on her. Like, she had showed me no respect during this. I was going to show her no respect. So I called on every single other person in the entire room. And sure enough, at the end, there's one hand left up. And I didn't have any choice but to call on her. And I did, and I finally said, yes, can I help you? Sort of rudely. And she said, oh, this is your story. And what she had been doing was doodling what I was talking about, and literally she does this professionally. Agent Finn, she's awesome. And anyway, so now this is my story. I don't have to tell it anymore. But you'll notice, Danny, by the way, do you see SSS? You see, Danny probably recognizes a bunch of these things, and you will too when we're done. So anyway, that's what happened the last time I did this. Hopefully you guys will be more engaged. So in hindsight, I was always an entrepreneur, but I didn't realize it, right? What I realized was there were things that I wanted to achieve, and I needed money to do them. So I would cut lawns. I would wash cars. And it was all because I had a love of, I would deliver newspapers. And it was all because I had a love of sailing. And my dream was to own a sailboat. When I was 10 years old, a friend of mine and I bought a boat. It didn't look quite like this. Those are far 40s. I have sailed on those. They're awesome, but that was, do we have any sailors in the room? No sailors? Sort of? All right, anyway, they're awesome. They're fun. But yeah, literally when I was 10 and Mark was 13, we bought a sailboat together with the money we had made washing cars, cutting lawns, and delivering newspapers. It was $200. We each needed $100. I only had 83. I had to borrow 17 from my father. I was very embarrassed to ask him for the $17, which I did pay him back, by the way. You know my father. I definitely paid him back. But the reason I did this was I had this passion about sailing that lasted for a long time, and I actually thought that I was going to be a naval architect. I was going to design sailboats for a living. That was my dream. So I came to Brown to get an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering, to then go get a graduate degree in naval architecture and design sailboats. I joined the sailing team, was on the sailing team here, had a blast. It was awesome. Now, I don't know, how many of you know what the America's Cup is? So the America's Cup looks something like that. Those are 12 meters. And when I was a sophomore at Brown in 1983, the America's Cup was held in Newport, Rhode Island, where it had been for the last 153 years, and we had never lost. It was the longest winning streak in the history of sports. And I went down and I watched the America's Cup, and in person watched us lose to Australia for the first time in 153 years. More important than our losing, though, was that I lost my passion for wanting to be in the sailing industry, because I looked at how much money was being spent and for what. Literally, they were spending tens of millions of dollars to see whose sailboat could go around a triangular course faster. Like, how does that make the world a better place? And so I decided that all that conspicuous consumption, that wasn't for me, and I didn't want to do that. I still like to sail. I enjoy sailing, but I'm not going to dedicate my life to making a faster sailboat. So what do you do when you're 21 years old with an engineering degree looking for a job? Career services. We used to have paper books, right? No internet then. Paper books. You thumb through the paper books. You find out who's coming to campus to interview. And for me at the time, engineering, that was submarines and helicopters. General Dynamics, Sikorsky aircraft. What could be cooler than being a 21-year-old guy designing submarines or designing helicopters. I thought that was going to be amazing. And I was excited to do it. General Dynamics, they're down in Groton, Connecticut, went through their interview process here and then down there. And then they called me back down there and they hinted they were going to make me a job offer. And I was pretty excited. That's kind of cool, graduating, right? Getting a job offer. And so the night before, they take you out to dinner, fancy dinner, all this stuff. And then you go in, and it looks sort of like this. It was actually much worse than this. This is just one little section of cubes. It was a building that was the size of a football field with a football field size of cubes. And it actually was 7 floors of football fields of cubes. Now, the manager, he had a little bigger cube because he was a manager. He was up in front. But he was so excited to tell me about General Dynamics and about this job and building and how he had spent the last 18 months working on this amazing project designing a hinge for a submarine door. I had to stop him. I said, I'm sorry, I thought you said hinge. And he said, yeah. He had spent 18 months of his life designing a hinge. And I could not run out of there fast enough. So I didn't take the job. And I needed another option. And you really, what's the saying? The difference between fiction and reality is that fiction has to be believable. So I walked out of there thinking, God, I really need another option. You know, what do I do with this design degree? I go back to career services, I thumb through the paper, and there's a company called Design Options. I had no idea what they did, but their title, the company name was exactly what I needed, and so I decided I'm going to go interview with them. And it turns out they were doing consulting, software development. It was in Boston, a group of 60 people, really smart, really high energy, fun, work hard, play hard. That's for me. That's way more fun than designing a hinge for a year and a half. And I got a job offer, and I was about to accept it, and I realized my family's in Chicago. I've always wanted to go back to Chicago. And so I picked up the phone, and I called, and that's not really me. But phones, they did have cords on them. Newsflash, phones used to have cords and were attached to the wall, kind of like that. And so I was in my room at 28 Barnes Street. Okay, who knows 28 Barnes Street? Do you know where that is, roughly? So we live, do you have friends who live there? You're laughing.
I live kind of there.
Okay.
298 Hope Street.
Okay, you're right there. Yeah. What's crazy is that building, 28 Barnes Street, we rented it. We had the second and third floors on the west side, west side, yeah, of the building. And the rumor was that the Talking Heads, one of the Talking Heads had lived in the first floor and burning down the house or something like that was written there. And then it turns out, you know who lived? Jessica Kim, another entrepreneur from Brown, class of 2000, I think. She lived in that house, and I've gotten to know her very well. I actually saw her the other day. And then Craig Powell lived in that house, another entrepreneur from Brown. Crazy, just randomness. It's just a random house. Anyway, so I'm in my room at 28 Barnes. I'm on the phone, and I'm talking to this guy. I'd spent the previous 2 summers in Chicago doing custom software development. So the first year was actually for my grandfather's company, and the next year was for a medical company. And I had to buy a computer, and so I had looked up and found the place I could get the best computer. And it was this place called MPK Computing. And I called Michael, and I said, hey, Michael, I got this job offer at Design Options in Boston, but I really want to be in Chicago. Is there Design Options in Chicago? And he says, no, there really isn't. You know, you should start one. And I laughed out loud on the phone. I remember it. I was sitting on my bed, not quite like that, but I was sitting on my bed, and I laughed out loud on the phone. He said, no, I'm serious. I've seen what you've done the last 2 years. I thought I was going to get a job cleaning up after this dumb college kid. You have 2 successful installations of software, 2 referenceable clients, and my company is growing. I now have 4 employees. I need a new accounting system. I'll be your first customer. So I thought about it, and I said, you know, maybe I should. Maybe I'll do that. And to give you an idea of what this meant, this was the state of the art. So that's the original IBM PC with its operating system, and that's what we were working with. And so I did a bunch of research. I came out in July after graduation. I knocked on Michael's door, and he said, oh, Troy, good to see you. Why are you here? I said, we'll talk about the accounting system. He said, oh, yeah, I got this brand new Unix-based system under the desk. He had totally forgotten about our conversation. He'd gone out and bought a CAN system. So I'd lost my first customer before I was even in business. But that's okay. I decided to do it anyway because I realized I had the power of 0. I had nothing. You can't get any lower. I was living in my parents' house. I had no mortgage. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a car payment, right? The worst thing that could happen is I could hate it after 6 months and be 22 years old looking for a job. Nothing to lose. It was the time to go for it. So I did. And it turned out that it went pretty well. So 1986, and I wanted one little short story to give you an idea of what it was like. Today, you guys all come to a lecture on entrepreneurship. There's an entrepreneurship center here on campus. There was none of that. Zero. As a matter of fact, I was about 6 months into doing this. I remember very well. So I was at a party, and I was with a bunch of people, and this fairly attractive woman came up and started talking to me, and she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I've got this company, and I write software." And she said, "Oh, you're an entrepreneur." I said, "Well, yeah." And then I went home that night and looked it up in the dictionary because I didn't know what it meant. It wasn't part of our lexicon, right? There was no Shark Tank on TV, right? They didn't talk about this stuff. Whereas today, obviously, everybody talks about it. But it went pretty well. Danny joined us a couple of years later. With no venture capital, we didn't even know what venture capital was, let's be clear. Doubled every year, made a ton of mistakes, grew on our revenues, and doubled every year. So year one, that was me, right? That meant that year two, I brought on a second person. And actually, I had breakfast with him this morning, Ed Goff. He lives in Providence now, but he was my first partner. Then year two, we brought on 2 more people, and then year 3, we brought on 4 more people, but it was all from revenue. And we thought we were exploding, explosive growth. We were at like 8 people in year 3. By today's standards, it was pretty meager. But at the end of the day, by 1992, 6 years in, we had customers like ASAP Software, Computer Discount Warehouse. So that little company, the guy Michael that I talked to, MPK Computing, so he changed the name of that company a couple years later to Computer Discount Warehouse, became CDW, publicly traded company. I think today they do $9 billion in computer sales. And we ended up writing a lot of software for them as they grew. So from their 4 people when we first met him to the 400 salespeople who were on the phones running our software to quote things online, et cetera. It was awesome. They were really helpful. Abbott Labs, McDonald's, Medline Industries, which I'll talk about more in a second, and Hyatt Hotels. We did Hyatt's worldwide purchasing system in 1992. Danny's laughing because he knows what that means. He was there. That meant that in Chicago, they would type into a computer what they should buy, negotiate prices, and they used to fax price lists around the world and then get faxed back all kinds of stuff that they had bought and try to aggregate it. We put it all on a disk. So they put the disk in, they hit a button, wrote it. They took that disk, put it in a FedEx envelope, FedExed it to Paris, France. In Paris, at the Hyatt Hotel, they took it out of the FedEx envelope, put it in their computer, hit a button. It read all that data, said, "Ooh, now I know what you need to buy." It wrote down all the data of what they had bought in the last 30 days. They took it out, put it back in a FedEx envelope, sent it back to Chicago where it came out of the envelope, back in the computer, read it, and they thought it was amazing. Obviously, we didn't have the internet. But that was a big deal, having software. We were a little 12-person company at that point, and we had software in every Hyatt hotel in the world.
Is that Rosemont?
Rosemont Purchasing.
I sold that.
Yep, exactly. Do you remember the names of the people? Now we'll dig. There was a woman who headed it up. I don't remember their names either.
But I remember Rosemont.
So what ended up happening is that little company in the right, Medline Industries, which is kind of a smaller version of Baxter, they make linens and syringes and bedpans, that kind of stuff. They ended up buying our company in the end of '92, and Danny was one who helped negotiate and help that transaction come to fruition. I then had a 5-year earnout. Ooh, that's a long time. But at the end of those 11 years, I felt like I really learned something and knew something about running businesses and got a lot of great experience. From there, I joined a company called Jellyvision. How many people know what You Don't Know Jack is? Not as popular. Another Brown alum, by the way. Awesome game. It was one of the first interactive multimedia games. They sold about 5 million copies of the CD-ROM. You Don't Know Jack, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, etc. Today, Jellyvision is doing amazing, about 350 people. I helped them build their original technology. Left there to create a company called Sure Payroll. We were the first ones to do payroll online. So in 1999, people were starting to pay their bills online. We said they should pay their employees. So we built that system, grew it. Over the course of growing it, we were on the Inc. 500 2 years in a row, and then sold to Paychex. Ran a company called Amici, which was in the data space. They have name, address, phone number data on every single one of you. and every single business in the US. You probably haven't heard of them. They sell to people like Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. They have a brand you may have heard of called Localese that powers Facebook Places, YellowPages.com. Google uses their data. And then I had a publishing company called OneWed. The idea was that we were going to take people's life cycle marketing from the time they get engaged and get married to have kids, real estate, all the way to end-of-life funerals. Didn't work out quite as well as we'd like, but was definitely an interesting journey. So all of this was done in Chicago, and it was done at a time when there wasn't a lot of support. Do you guys know what food deserts are? Who's heard of food deserts? Right? So food deserts are these areas typically in inner cities where people don't have access to the fresh food that they need to lead healthy lives, right? And so you see kids going to school with Cheetos they bought at the corner drugstore or the corner gas station. Whole Foods is combating this. They're putting a couple Whole Foods in south side of Chicago in these underprivileged neighborhoods to try to provide fresh fruit and foodstuffs. But I'm not here to talk to you about food deserts. I'm here to talk to you about what Chicago was, which was an entrepreneurship desert. It was really the same thing. There were entrepreneurs like me who were trying to do good stuff but didn't have the support they needed, and that's what Chicago was like that entire time. Let's fast forward to 2008. I'm teaching entrepreneurship at Northwestern to undergrads, and part of this was new venture development, and at the end, each of the teams would present to a panel of venture capitalists, and I had one team in particular that was different. And the way I knew it was different was after their besides they worked their butts off and they were awesome, afterwards, each of the 4 VCs came up to me and said some version of, are those guys doing that for class or for real? Because if they're doing it for real, I want to talk to them. And they wanted to do it for real. It was called Next Big Sound. They had a music discovery platform, and we got them like $25,000 in seed capital and a place to work in the summer of 2008. They struggled. It was a really cool application, but they had tens of thousands of monthly active users, and they needed tens of millions. They were off by 3 orders of magnitude, and they really struggled. And they were about to shut it down. They were out of money. Alex was couch surfing, eating ramen noodles. He had graduated. The other 2 were seniors. And then they stumbled upon this thing called Techstars. And they called me up, and I remember Alex calling me up and saying, hey, Troy, we got into Techstars in Boulder. Should we do it? And I'd heard the word Techstars, but I didn't really know what Techstars was. And he started to tell me about it, and he got about as far as, we got to spend the summer in Boulder. They're going to give us $18,000. I didn't have to hear anymore. Have you guys been to Boulder? Boulder is awesome. Go! They're paying you to be in. So it turns out that it's a mentorship-based program. We'll talk a little bit more about what it is. But they piled into David's VW. They drove out to Boulder, and they were in the cohort in 2009 in Boulder. And it was awesome. I went down there. I mentored them. I was there for demo day. And it was awesome for a couple of reasons. The first is that there were 10 companies in Techstars cohort in Boulder. They had just opened a second location in Boston that had 9. Of those 19 companies, 5 were from Chicago. So Chicago is about 1% of the US population, but it was over 25% of the Techstars population. We rock. Except they all left and never came back. So Next Big Sound, it turns out they got funding. At demo day, so 2 things. One is they pivoted from their original business to something else related to music and data. And at demo day, they got on stage asking for $350,000. They had a line of venture capitalists waiting to meet with them and talk to them. They turned a bunch away and raised over $1 million. But their lead investor was Foundry Group out of Boulder, Colorado. They moved to Boulder. They never came back to Chicago. By the way, subsequently, they raised another $6.5 million from IA Ventures in New York. And then they moved to New York because that's where they were. And if you don't believe me that they did fairly well, so you guys know Billboard.com. And Billboard.com, Billboard for 50 years literally got their data from one source, that was AC Nielsen, until Next Big Sound. And now they buy data from Next Big Sound and AC Nielsen. And then, how many of you are familiar with the Forbes 30 under 30? You know that thing, 30 under 30 list, 30 under 30 music. So 3 years in a row, it looked something like this. It was Lil Wayne and Taylor Swift and Rihanna and Katy Perry and Bruno Mars and Justin Bieber and Alex. There he is. That's literally what the 30 under 30 was. And he still looks like that. I just saw him a couple weeks ago. He's now 29. He just turned 30. He just had his 30th birthday. But it was Alex and a bunch of rock stars, according to Forbes. And then they recently, a year and a half ago, sold their business to Pandora, and he's now part of Pandora. So, next big sound should have been in Illinois, but it ended up in Boulder and then New York. What's that logo? Where was that founded? University of Illinois, right? All the tech came out of University of Illinois, ended up, we didn't have it. PayPal, those guys, Illinois. Steve Chen went to Illinois Math Science Academy with Sam Yagan. PayPal was, so was YouTube, which was Steve Chen. Zynga, Pincus went to University of Illinois, should have been here. Oracle, Larry Ellison dropped out of University of Illinois to go do Oracle and moved out to San Francisco. So what happened was, that day, August 6, 2009, when Next Big Sound was pitching, there were a handful of us from Chicago and Boulder to see it. We all went out to dinner, and we said, we got to do something about this, and we want to keep it here. We don't want to have that kind of brain drain. So what we did was we created an accelerator. We actually went to Techstars and said, hey, Techstars, will you open up Chicago? And David Cohen and Brad Feld, and they said, you know, we'd love to, but we're too busy. We just did Boston. That worked well. We're going to do New York and Seattle next, and we don't have the bandwidth. But you know what? We have this saying, give first. We're happy to help you. Here are best practices. Here are documents. Here's the legal stuff. Here's what you do. Here's how you do it. You should go do it. And so we did. We just couldn't call it Techstars. We called it Accelerate. And Accelerate is a startup for startups. And I'm going to play a short video for you to see what we created with Accelerate Labs. It's betting on the entrepreneurs, but they have to have a business idea that's good enough.
I believe we're at the very beginning of a very aggressive ramp of innovation.
It's the quality of the entrepreneur, someone who's bright, who's dynamic, who will be flexible enough to be able to pivot and make those tough decisions. Those are the people we want to bet on.
We didn't really know what the experience was going to be like, but we thought, you know, no matter what, at the end of this, people are going to know who we were, and they didn't before that, so we thought, okay, we'll get something out of this. And it was beyond our imagination how wonderful it was.
I'm Sam Yagan, co-founder of Accelerate. I have been the co-founder and CEO of SparkNotes, eDonkey, and OKCupid. At Accelerate, we connect mentors, people who have been around the block once, twice, 3, 10 times, and take their knowledge and their brains and make that available to the entrepreneurs doing this for the first time.
It would have taken me literally 2 to 3 years to set the meetings with the kind of mentors we had that I was able to get in a period of weeks and Accelerate.
Every successful entrepreneur loves to go back to their roots and work at the very inception of a business. And what better way to do it than as a mentor to other first-time entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs at the very beginning of their arc.
And that, more than anything, is one thing I got from Accelerate. Engagements and relationships with people who were really interested in seeing us succeed.
Accelerate really gave us exposure to awesome investors, great mentors in the Chicago community, and then companies that wanted to try us out and give us a lot of feedback.
We've had as mentors the founders of Groupon, GrubHub, OpenTable, OKCupid, CBW, Priceline, Sitter City. The list goes on and on. It's an amazing group of people.
Demo Day is the culmination of Accelerate. It is the day at the end of the summer where investors fly in and press from all over the country and hear these very carefully crafted pitches that we've been practicing all summer.
Venture capitalists from both coasts, as well as really great larger companies coming to buy and partner with the smaller companies that are getting started here in Chicago.
I am totally blown away by this year's Accelerate. It was absolutely fantastic, and as you know, I was around for the very first one. These keep getting better and better and better. I think it's turned into much more of a platform, and you can see by the attendees, it's a broader group. It's just perfect.
The investment opportunities are amazing. We have 400 investors here from around the country looking at these startups. It has really come so far in such a short time. It's an incredible program that every startup should think about applying to.
Immediately after I walked off stage and kind of got back to the front of the house,
Someone came up, shook my hand, said, Justin, I love what you said. I'm in, I want to invest, and gave me a dollar amount. And 2 weeks later, I had to check.
We're looking for three things in successful Accelerate applications. The first is that you're solving an interesting problem. The second is that your solution to that problem will actually work. And the third is that you've put together a great team of people to implement that solution.
Accelerate is an absolute must for any entrepreneur looking to change the trajectory of his or her company.
Accelerate Labs is access to a network that you never knew cared about you.
Accelerate Labs will change your business for the better.
Accelerate is the platform to make the leap.
Accelerate Labs is one of the premier accelerators in the country, if not the world. More importantly, we focus on not just the business, but the entrepreneur. We build great entrepreneurs. So that's what we created. And when I say we, I mean sort of the royal we. So this was a snapshot of that year. We had 100, you can see up in the little box, 145 mentors who did 740 one-on-one meetings with our companies in the month of June alone. It's incredible how the community comes out to really help and engage and mentor these companies. So to give you an idea of scope, so Accelerate, we had been, at this point, we've been in business for 3 years. We had 30 companies that had gone through. We take 10 at a piece. So if I told you I've got a business that's 3 years old, I've raised $35 million, which is what those companies had raised, and I have 170 employees, that's a hell of a trajectory. Think about that as a company. 3 years old, 170 employees, raised $35 million. And that's really what we had created. And it was then, literally 2 weeks after that video was created, you saw Brad Feld, the guy with the long hair, talking about giving back. He came back to Chicago and he said, hey, you know, we kind of like what's going on in Chicago. Would you guys join Techstars? And so while he had turned us down at first, we became part of Techstars then. So I want to give you an idea. So I talked about the entrepreneurship desert, and it really was, and it felt like Accelerate was in this broad, wide open space with nothing there. And then what happened was Chicago as an ecosystem started really building. This thing called 1871 opened up. 1871 today is a co-working space with 150,000 square feet, 2,000 entrepreneurs a day working out of there. That's the Howard and the ex-governor. There are programs like this all over all the time. Going on in 1871. But it wasn't just 1871. Built in Chicago, which is the digital town hall for technology. There's now built in not just Chicago, but built in LA, built in Boston for you guys, built in New York, built in Colorado, built in Austin, Texas. Healthbox and accelerator for healthcare companies that are focused on healthcare. The Starter League Learning to Code, Impact Engine, which is impact companies doing, for-profit companies doing social or environmental good. Firestarter Fund, a bunch of CEOs who had been doing angel investment pooled our money and put together a $6 million fund to help early stage ventures in Chicago. TechNexus, another co-working space. Startup Institute, if you don't want to start a company but you want to go work for a startup, you go to Startup Institute. Catapult Technori, The Grind, Unplugged Leadership. It went literally from an entrepreneurship desert to an entrepreneurship oasis. It's amazing to see how the community has transformed, and I'm really proud to have been part of that little catalyst. What I thought I would show you guys next is a short clip or a video of one of our companies at the end of Techstars. So what happens at Techstars, this year we had 2,300 companies at the top of the funnel. We interviewed about 250. We got serious with about 50. We did lots of subsequent interviews, 25 finalists, and we take 10. Those 10, we wrap with what they need to be successful. So they get seed capital, they get office space, they get tons of perks. If you go to the Techstars website, it's literally, if you used every one, it'd be over $2 million. So $360,000 worth of free hosting from Microsoft, $120,000 from Amazon, credit card processing from Braintree, all that stuff. You couldn't use it all. Most importantly is the mentorship we talked about. This year, I think it was 163 mentors who did 603 one-on-one meetings. They run through this really intensive 90-day program that culminates with the demo day at the House of Blues that you heard Stella talk about in the previous video. But we're creating real economic value, so I'm not going to go through. I'm going to buzz through these. These are billion-dollar range acquisitions and IPOs that have happened in Chicago in the last couple of years. It's phenomenal to see what happened when Oracle acquired Techstars. Along the way, I saw lots of opportunity. I started doing angel investing with Next Big Sound. Not only was it my entry into Techstars, but it was my first angel investment. Made a $10,000 investment in that one. Subsequently made 27 others for a total of 28 angel investments. And then about 2.5 years ago, founded a venture fund, Math Venture Partners, with the guy who funded us with Sure Payroll back in the day. So what I thought I would do now is just give you a couple of quick lessons learned through my entrepreneurial journey and then open up for Q&A. So let's see. First one is always back to sailing. Life is easier with the wind at your back. If you find an industry that has rapid growth, there are fewer existing players, that growth will cover a lot of mistakes. And my favorite quote, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And if you think about what I've done over the year, custom software in 1986, nobody was doing that. It's sort of like, when you're out with your buddies and you're camping and a bear comes, you don't need to outrun the bear, you just need to outrun your buddy, right? Same thing here, right? Land of the blind. So you only need to be one better than who's there, and in a rapidly growing market, that goes away. It is much easier to sell painkillers than vitamins. How many of you have heard that expression with business before? All right, so I'll make it tangible. So I used to be a marathon runner. I ran 7 marathons in 2 years. I ended up with a herniated disc. I can't run anymore. Once every 4 or 5 years, I can't get out of bed. Literally, the pain is so sharp, I can't get out of bed. And I don't know what I'm going to do. And I would pay any amount of money because I feel like I'm never going to walk again. I end up going to the doctor, getting the MRI, gives me the exercise, do your core exercises every day, and it'll be fine. And I do them religiously for about a week, and then I feel better. Do you think I did my core exercises this morning? No, it's a vitamin, right? I don't need it. I feel fine. But if tomorrow I can't get out of bed, I would pay any amount of money to get that problem fixed. Same thing with business. Find the pain. If you find the pain, it is so much easier to sell. There's nothing more important than customers. When you guys think about your businesses, when you think about building them, when you build your financial model, everybody thinks about the product and the features. None of that matters unless it gets you more customers. Opinions don't matter unless they come from the market. Many times people will come to me and they'll say, Troy, I want your opinion on this business. Should I sell these widgets? And I say, my opinion doesn't matter. I'm n equals 1. You need n equals 1,000. Go to 1,000 people and ask. I may be the only human on this planet that hates your product. I may be the only human on the planet who likes your product. You have to go to the market. Solve a real problem with a great product and you'll win. Both of those things are really difficult. So with that, I want to open up to Q&A and see what questions you have. Yeah.
I actually have 2 questions.
Awesome.
My first question is, after selling your company, what were some of the factors that went into your subsequent jobs at the companies you went on to work for?
Yep.
And my second question is, do you have an example of a pitch you'd like to share with people who maybe are in Accelerate that don't have that much experience? Each of the founders have 15 years of working experience. Is there anyone with 5 years?
So we have people, and by the way, feel free to leave. I know it's 1 o'clock, which is what this was scheduled to. You may have classes to go to. I'm not insulted. People have done far worse. You didn't throw things at me, so I'm good. So first part of the question, what did I do? So I sold the company. I had a 5-year earnout. After the 5-year earnout was up, I took a summer off. My friends called it the summer of Troy. I biked and sailed and did marathons, did all kinds of fun stuff. And then a friend of mine, another Brown alum, Harry Gottlieb, who was running Jellyvision, wanted to build technology as a core part of his core competency, and he kept taking me out to lunch. Why do I do this? Who should I hire? It's like, you're not doing anything. Why don't you just do it? I'm like, no, I want to go start another company. No, but you could do this. It'd be easy for you to take you 3 months. It'd be done. He talked me into it. Took a year and a half, but I built out the technology department for him, and then left to go start Sure Payroll. So that was kind of a transition. The second question was about, so this happens to be a team that had some more experience. This year we had a team where literally one of them turned 21 while they were in our program. There were 2 brothers, so it's fairly common for us to have young people as well. Although people think about accelerators as a bunch of 21-year-olds, and it actually, our median age is early 30s. So we've had everything. One of our more successful ones, Sue Kim, who is brilliant.org, she's out in San Francisco. She actually never finished her undergrad because she was busy building her business and came into Accelerate Labs after her junior year of undergrad. So it's all over the board. Yeah, I think it's sometimes easier to get funded and easier if you have more experience to point to. People think about venture capitalists as these big risk takers. The reality is that the good ones are people who are good at mitigating risk in an inherently risky environment. And so if you have some experience to point to, that really helps. For sure. Yep.
So I work in the community here in Rhode Island, Providence, and run hackathons at the city level and the state level.
Awesome.
And working on a startup, and it's outside of the brown bubble. Rhode Island has an entrepreneurial desert. You're talking about the food desert.
Yeah.
And so what are your thoughts about launching startups here in Rhode Island, in Providence in particular?
So I haven't lived in Rhode Island for a long time, so I don't know about this particular ecosystem, but you're certainly not far from Boston, you're not far from New York. That doesn't mean you have to have your company there. There's lots of talent, there are lots of smart people. And Chicago's interesting, so a lot of people say, oh no, you gotta start your company in the Valley. You know what, you could, and people say, oh, it's easier to raise money in the Valley. There's a lot more money there, but there are a lot more people vying for it. Also, everything is a lot more expensive and a lot more competitive. Literally, there was a study done recently, so I'll get the numbers wrong, but I'll be directionally correct. Second-year engineer in Chicago, average comp was like, I don't know, it was 115, and in Silicon Valley it was like 165. So the takeaway from that could be, oh, we gotta go to, I'm an engineer, I gotta go to Silicon Valley. You actually have a higher standard of living and more buying power with your 115 in Chicago than you do with your 165 in San Francisco. You much higher lifestyle, and you probably have some of that same effect here in Providence. I'm guessing, I don't know, but cost of living is probably less in Providence than it is in Boston or New York. There are probably some really smart people hanging around here who are computer science majors or who are, right? And so you can get some great talent. And I actually like going to underserved markets, per se. So Techstars strategy, there are 25 Techstars around the globe. We're not in Silicon Valley. We're trying to build communities where there isn't community. So they came into Chicago as that was starting to come up. We're in Cape Town, we're in Tel Aviv, we're in Berlin, London, Atlanta, Boulder, right? All kinds of cities that aren't the number one you necessarily think about, but we help build those communities. There's more opportunity there. So I wouldn't be afraid of starting here in Providence, but I don't know this system specifically. Yeah?
I had a question. My mother's side's from Chicago, so I appreciate the little shout out. But how much of the people that you attract have to do with like social enterprise in terms of that being an attractive quality within the people that you accept into your program?
So Techstars is not focused on social enterprise. We do a lot of it, and we've had a number of companies that have been double bottom line companies. When I say a number, probably 10%. Impact Engine, which I pointed out up there, is a fund that only does double bottom line companies and is really focused on that. We're not at all against it, love it, but that's not our mission. Our mission is to help entrepreneurs and to build an ecosystem is our primary mission. And if we can do that while doing other kinds of good, that's even better. It's a double bonus. Yeah.
So first, I have two questions. First is just you might have said this already, but double bottom line is referring to?
Oh, doing good while doing well. So, a for-profit business that also helps people, whether it's social, environmental, right, doing some other good. Okay. Tom's Shoes is an example of one mechanism for that. For every pair of shoes you buy, they donate a shoes to underprivileged.
Okay. And then, so in terms of location-wise, and you said there's a bunch of them all over places. There's how do you get involved, or do you have to work with them? What if you just want to learn? Or
so we have so Techstars. So I'll speak with what we do. We have associates every year. Mm-hmm. We typically have 3. Usually it's 2 MBAs, 1 undergrad. Sometimes it's 3 MBAs, whatever. But it's people who come. The pay sucks. We're basically like a nonprofit. Think about it as a nonprofit. But there is a stipend that they get, and they work their butts off for 3 months helping these companies and helping run the program and learn so much and meet so many people. It is an amazing opportunity. So all 25 programs in Techstars around the globe, each of them has roughly 3 to 5 associates, and then we usually have about 3 technical associates. So if you're a developer or if you're a designer, you can come in as a technical associate and help work with the 10 companies that way. It's an amazing opportunity to get in. Yeah, Techstars acquired a thing called Up Global, which runs Startup Weekend. Do you guys know what Startup Weekend is? Do you have that here?
Yes.
So Startup Weekend runs 1,100 Startup Weekends a year around the globe in 160 countries. It's all over the place. It's phenomenal. We're in more countries than Starbucks. It's a totally nonprofit volunteer organization and they do hackathons. And typically, what happens with the startup weekend is you'll show up Friday night, 70 to 100 people. Everybody gets up and pitches their idea. You'll coalesce around 10 to 12 ideas that they're going to execute on. Everybody joins one of those teams or decides to go home. You're done. You now have 48 hours to go execute on that idea. Go do customer discovery, build a prototype, and on Sunday night you pitch. Typically there are cash prizes and awards, and you pitch what you've done over the last 48 hours, and the winner gets support. Usually it's, some cash, some, a law firm will give them free legal hours, free incorporation, that kind of stuff. And it's a great way for people who haven't been entrepreneurs to dip their toe in the water and see what it's like. And they're run literally all over the globe. Yeah.
Yes, and I just heard on Twitter, I think it was yesterday, that Techstars got their B.
So we became a B Corp actually about 3 months ago, but it was just kind of publicized a lot recently. Yeah.
No, I have two questions as well. One of them is in terms of the investors. Every time a startup gets money from an investor, there's an interest that is given. So I just wanted to learn more about sort of the relationship from your point of view, like in terms of Techstars. The relationship between the startups and the investors. Has there been, from your experience, has it been pretty productive for the larger in terms of, because often I hear mentions of like, oh yeah, but I got this many investors and this much money, and then I had to shift what I intended to do, and it ended up not being. So can you talk a little bit more about that? And then also in terms of Braintree, because I know they're like a platform for payments. What is the benefit for participating in Techstars? Is it like a free or is it lower?
So that's the easy one. So you can look up all this stuff on Techstars' website, but I believe the Braintree offers $50,000 worth of free processing. Braintree was a Chicago company that was sold to PayPal for $800 million, Brian Johnson. In terms of, I think what you're asking is, how much risk is there to me as a founder if I take outside money that it will it will steer the direction of my company? Is that sort of what you're asking?
Well, yeah, but in the particular case of Techstars, like from your experience, are most startups pretty comfortable and happy with the relationships they've established with the investors, or do you vet the investors in any way? Or?
So we have introduced them to investors. So there have been 914 companies that have gone through Techstars across the globe. Those 914 companies have raised over $2.5 billion and have a value of over $8 billion today. And that's growing by 250 companies a year now with 25 locations. So lots of activity with investors. Some of our companies choose not to take investment. Usually 7 or 8 out of 10 do. It is a double-edged sword when you take money. So I took money when we built Sure Payroll, and it helped a ton. We couldn't have built it without venture capital. We got quickly from 0 to about 80 people, and then I realized I probably wasn't the right CEO. I'm really good at being scrappy in startups, but I was managing people who were telling me about the people they manage, and that's no longer fun for me, nor interesting, nor am I good at it. And so the board asked me to step aside, and I did, and it was the best thing for the company. It was a great outcome. But that wasn't comfortable. The company is way bigger than it ever would have been had it been me and my money. We actually couldn't have gotten it off the ground. It's a double-edged sword. But in general, the investors are there to support the management until they're not. And what happens is at some point, if you are doing your job, and I'm on the boards of a bunch of companies, and this is not a Techstars company, but a company called Eat Street. Do you guys know Eat Street, food ordering? I don't know if they're in Providence. No. So it's an app for ordering food for delivery. Check it out if you are. But anyway, and they're in the process of making a big change that I'm not excited about. But at 10 o'clock last night when I was on the phone with the CEO, I said, listen, you know where I stand, but I'm here to support you. I said, I hope you prove me wrong. You want to go do this? Let's do this. This is a bet the company move they're making. They're doing something that is really big, and this is the biggest decision you've ever made. I will support you 100%. If it were my decision, I wouldn't do it. But it's not my decision. It's management's decision. And that's how boards typically operate. And he is the kind of guy who will walk through walls to make things happen, and he will make it work. And that's why I have no qualms about backing him in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this is a very specific question, but I've noticed on the Techstars website that there's sort of like themed applications.
So we have two kinds of programs. A city program, ours. So if I were a doctor, I'd be a general practitioner. We kind of do a little of everything.
Gotcha.
And then there are some vertical programs. So we partnered with Barclays and FinTech. There's a music program now in LA. There was a program with Disney. There's a program in Minneapolis around retail with Target, etc.
So upon graduation from Baylor University, I kind of decided to decline my full-time offer at Google and kind of start a startup. And the startup that I started was My Barber, and we provide on-site haircuts for employers, offices, apartment complexes, and universities. And recently we got into the VVM accelerator, but previously we had applied to Techstars and didn't get in. So I guess my question is, how can in the future I prepare myself to apply again with more metrics and more things like that to really strengthen my application?
So every location makes its own decisions. So I don't think you applied to Chicago.
No, I applied to Boston.
Boston. So Boston is run by a guy named Semyon. He has a particular set of things that he looks at. I can't tell you what they are. I know Semyon pretty well, but that may be different than what I look at. In Chicago, we really focus on customer acquisition and retention and growth. Companies that have already proven product market fit but need help with that growth, that's what our expertise is. And so we're looking for evidence. You saw all those graphs up and to the right on Fitbot. Well, they had part of that before they came in. We helped extend them. But we saw there was something there. There were great engagement metrics. There were great repeat customers. There was low churn. They just needed help in getting it bigger. And that's what we could really help with. So for Chicago, that's what we really focused on. The guys out in Boulder are really a little more focused on product. They like great product, great technology. They believe if you build something awesome, people will come. I believe you got to sell it. So we're all a little bit different, and it doesn't hurt to apply to many of them. I mean, it's just like applying to college, right? And every college is going to be a little different, has a little different feel, but it doesn't hurt to apply to many of them. So hit me an email if you want. I'm just Troy at Techstars, I think. Whatever. I'm just Troy at Techstars. And if you want to send me stuff to look at, and just make sure in the subject line you reference Brown so that I'm like, oh, okay, that's not a spam. But I'm pretty good in responding to email pretty quickly.
How do you do that?
I try to get to every email within a day, and I usually do. Not always, but I usually do. All right, I have to get running because I'm doing office hours next door. I hope this was helpful and fun, and engage.